Cristin O'Keefe Aptowicz, what attracted you to the story of Thomas Dent Mutter?
Well, first, thank you to everyone at Shady Side. I want to say all of the professors here and all of the students. You guys have been really amazing. I've been here, this is probably my 6th or 7th time coming here. I did the very first poetry slam here years and years ago, and we are hosting a poetry slam after school today that I invite everyone to come. But it's been a real
In the library?
Joy to be a part of this community. You guys have a very special community. And in terms of what drew me to Mutter was, you know, I had a very different upbringing than you guys. Shady Side is an amazing school, and you guys have so many opportunities. Is it me?
Yeah.
How do I change this?
Back up. Actually, move your chair toward the curtain. It'll make a difference.
How's this? Yeah! This is just, get ready, yearbook. They'll be like, what was wrong with that writer? So, you know, I grew up in working class Philadelphia. My dad worked for the wastewater treatment department, and back in the time that I grew up, if you worked for the city of Philadelphia, you had to live within the city of Philadelphia. And so I lived in a neighborhood that was all cops and firefighters and garbage men. And to want to be a writer, which I knew that I wanted to be at a very young age, the path was very unclear, other than leave your neighborhood. So I was first introduced to the story of Mutter because I was actually seeking scholarship money. I had decided to go to school at NYU, studying writing, screenwriting, and NYU, not the cheapest college if you're going to be paying your own way through, FYI, seniors. And so I was always on the lookout for funding, and they had an Alfred P. Sloan Fellowship for the best screenplay or play written about the life of a scientist or scientific discovery.
Question?
Yes.
Does that scholarship still exist?
It still exists, and it exists in numerous different forms. Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. If you've ever listened to NPR or watched a PBS show, you probably are familiar with the tag where they go, Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. That's how they always say it. So they do great work, and if any of you are excited about Hidden Figures, which is the story of a trio of African-American women scientists who helped NASA get men on the moon, starring Janelle Monáe, and anyhow. You guys, that's an Alfred P. Sloan Foundation supported script. So they do a great job of help ushering scientific themed films into production in Hollywood. And I decided to write a script about Mutter. The Mutter Museum was something I grew up with as a child. The Mutter Museum being this place your older siblings would always tell you about, this scary place with babies in jars and women with horns growing from their head that you'd be eventually taken to. And I was taken there in the 4th grade by nuns. So if you really want to set up a nightmare scenario, it's disembodied body parts and nuns, and you're a child. So it was a lasting memory that I decided to revisit. And when I discovered Mutter's story, you know, I Googled him, and I didn't know if the Mutter Museum was founded by a man or a family, if Mutter was an acronym for something. There was nothing there. And even to this day, Mutter doesn't even have as much as a Wikipedia page, and I have a Wikipedia page. So he was a really forgotten figure. But digging into his life, I was really amazed at what a profound man he was, an empathetic man. And so I was able to follow through, and I wrote the screenplay. And I did not get that scholarship at that time, but I did end up winning other awards. And so it really paid off, and I really fell in love with Mutter.
And this was like 1998?
1999 was when I first stepped into the archival, museum archive to first research it, and the book did not come out to 2014. So it was a long journey to book form.
Right. So you went into the Mutter's Museum and said, okay, give me all of your research, and they're like, here's his whole life. Is that what happened?
No. As anyone who probably has done a research project here, you get a limited amount of research that's extraordinarily biased to the source that you are searching in. So the Mutter Museum, which was founded after Mutter died, had a lot of information about the collection, you know, the specimens within it, which was, you know, over 1,400, but they didn't have much biographical information on the man. I would need to go to Thomas Jefferson University, which is Jefferson Medical College during his time period, and they had a lot of information about meeting logs and faculty notes and alumni speeches and memoirs of other doctors on staff. But I didn't know a lot about his personal life, so I had to research who his guardian was, which was Colonel Robert Carter, and find the Carter family archives, which is at the College of William and Mary in Virginia. And then I wanted to find out about his wife, and the Alsop family papers is at Yale. So it made me feel like Indiana Jones, kind of like trying to find the artifacts to like pull together this epic adventure. And it was a lot of fun, but you know, you had to deal with the fact that history takes a lot of stuff that you can never get back, and there were going to be gaps that I would need to fill in and help, and use other research to help form a stronger story.
So you gather your research and you kept it in giant piles or like bags?
You can tell she's an English teacher, right? She's like, tell my students how you do your magic.
Tell my students how you do your magic.
Yes. So I'm a big transcriber. So when I would find interesting material, I would physically type it into a one-word document, and each word document represented each book or periodical or publication from which I was taking that information. And when I had amassed enough, I began to create a master outline that contained just, so none of my own prose writing, but just in chronological order, the most important facts I could pull from those documents with footnotes of where I got it from the publication, or endnotes rather. And then when I was ready to construct the story.
And this was in what color font?
This is in black font currently. But when I would do, once I got a good sense of the story, I would then do a chapter breakdown, which was my own interpretation of the outline. So for those, you guys have all read Dr. Moore's Marvels, it doesn't start with the birth of Moore, right? It starts with him leaving for Paris.
In media res is what we call it.
Yeah, so you start right at the beginning of what is the life-changing moment of his life, and then you do hear about his birth and his childhood. You figure those in. So to structure a story that would be an entertaining read as opposed to a academic, chronological read was important to me. And then once I had that chapter breakdown, I could fill in those chapters with these end-noted pieces of historical document. And at that point, I changed all the font to red. So that
all
I could,
the font of the research.
Of the research to red. And that way, it's helpful because as you are taking this research and synthesizing it into prose, it helps you keep track of what is not actually your own language. Because sometimes you have quotes, right? Sometimes Mooder says, come forth to charm, enlighten, and dazzle the world, end quote. That's really easy to understand. That came from another source. But another time, maybe you have a story about the story of Joseph Pankos doing an upper jaw removal and how all the students watching in the audience fainted and vomited in their seats, which I would totally do if I was in that scenario. That language is from the time period, and it's not a direct quote. I'm not quoting anything, but it's still the language. I'm still stealing that language. So it was really easy for me to identify language that was not mine by keeping the fonts different. And when I rewrote it and changed the language, then I could change it to black. And that way, when it came to the point of your research, which I'm sure you've all gotten to where you needed to do your citations, it made it really easy to pull, okay, this is where I got this, this is where I got this. And sometimes it was as small as a word. Sometimes they used a really wonderful descriptive word, and I would cite that in the back of my book, because I wouldn't want to take credit for anything that's not mine. And other times it was obviously much more extensive and easier to cite. But that's my tip for when you're doing your research. Different colored fonts to represent the different material.
You began with a script, and the script eventually evolved into this New York Times bestseller, Dr. Mooder's Marvels, or Mudders. We're not sure about the umlaut, but we have theories.
Yes.
And then you've recently shifted the book back into a script.
That's right. So the story was originally a screenplay, and people, I remember being asked why it would make it such a great screenplay, and you guys saw the pictures in the book. He worked a lot with severely disformed to figure people that we typically don't see anymore in first world countries. Primarily because we have antibiotics to prevent situations from getting worse. We have nutrition that prevents birth defects, prenatal vitamins, and knowing to avoid things like alcohol. And we also don't have the industrial accidents that really plagued the 19th century that caused many of the deformities like Fossey jaw. Labor laws now prevent that. So to me, it's easy to look at these people as objects, right? You see something in a museum and it's separate from you. And even in this book, you see illustrations. And a movie, to me, allows these people to be walking, talking representations. I'm not sure how many people here have ever seen the movie The Elephant Man. which is about the Elephant Man. And it starts out, you're like appalled by what this man looks like, and it's hard to even watch him. But as the movie progresses, you grow to see him as a human being, and how he looks. You begin to feel the burden that he feels that's not his fault. And so many of the people in this story, it's not their fault that when they were 4, they caught on fire and no one took them for medical attention. And yet they have to be hidden from public. So I wanted a movie to show these people walking and talking in a way that I tried to attempt to bring to life in prose, but that could be even more applicable. So after the success of the book, I decided to return to the screenplay, and which was a lot of fun, because in a screenplay, you're not as married to truth. You have to expand, right? I can't rely only on the dialogue that I found. There's not enough dialogue to have. You have to invent dialogue. And you're also able to expand on theories. Like, one of the defining elements of Mutter is that he dressed very fancifully as a dandy, known to match his suit to his horse to his carriage. And I can understand doing that as a young man, wanting to seek attention, but he continued to do this throughout his entire life. And I had always asked throughout my research, why did he do that? After he was established, he was a professor for 10 years. He didn't need to bring this attention to himself, so why did he keep wearing these fanciful clothes? And I was able to posit the theory that I have in the screenplay, which is, I imagine these people, that he was known as being painfully empathetic to his patients. Some of these people have never seen anyone outside of their family since they were 4, 5, 9, 10.
Because they would be stared at otherwise.
Right, they were hidden away. Women in particular were considered a burden, a shame. You can't admit to having a monster in your family because it would ruin marital prospects for your siblings if they knew that they would need to take care of this monster eventually when the parents died off. So you're talking about seeing no one but your immediate family for years of your life, and suddenly you're dragged out into an amphitheater filled with men staring at you. And how frightening that must have been for these people. And I imagined how Mutter could have helped ease that pain by having this trembling person go like, I'm just not used to all of these people that are gonna be looking at me, and having him flatten out the seams of his pink suit and going, oh honey, like, they're not gonna be looking at you, right? Like, he made himself an oddity as well. So that when people are doing these daring surgeries, when he walks into the room, people aren't like, oh, look at this horrible looking man, but going, is Mutter wearing a yellow silk suit to this thing? Is he crazy? Like, he became a suction of energy away from these people. And that was something I could posit in the screenplay, but that I couldn't posit in a book, because in screenplays you were allowed to expand on that theory in a way that you can't do in a strictly nonfiction book.
So would you call the screenplay of Dr. Mutter's Marvels, would you call it a love story?
No, I would not. Okay. I think, it's a story of a man who pushed himself into spaces that there was no room for him. No one expected anything of this orphan whose entire family died. He was sort of dumped on a plantation at the care of like a 20-year-old rich guy who didn't really care about him. No one thought, this is a man who will change the world. But Mutter knew. And so it's about him pushing into spaces that no one expected him to, and eventually no one wanted him to. He bucked a lot of trends in a society that was already firmly established. And but he was also funny and weird and quirky, and I wanted to make sure that that's all embraced. And the end story is that now it is a finalist at Sundance. So I'll be finding out, finding out the end of this month if it will indeed go to Sundance for their screenplay. So I'm like, I'm bewitched with this man. So I will keep writing about him as long as I can.
And in terms of writing, your writing career as a professional began when you were still in college. Is that correct?
That's right. I was 19 years old, so just a few years older than some of you in the audience today when I first began writing professionally. And that's something, that is available to you and your generation that was very hard for older generations and just beginning to happen, which is, there's like a New Yorker cartoon that I love, which is like a dog behind a computer, and he's turned into this other dog, and he's like, no one knows you're a dog on the internet. And I feel that way about young artists. I mean, there is really no difference between submitting to your school literary journal, which of course you should, and submitting to an adult literary journal. There's no way that they can tell the difference. It comes the same way. Frequently you can do email submissions, or there'll be submission websites where you just upload it. And if it's being viewed as an adult artist is something you're interested in, you can start that right now. And that was something that I learned when I was in New York City, was that because New York City was such a maelstrom of artistic opportunity, I had friends who were in the drama department, and they were auditioning for their school plays and auditioning for Broadway shows and off-Broadway shows. It was all just an audition for them, and it made me realize I can push my own boundaries myself. So instead of in addition to participating in the NYU slams, I began running adult slams at the same time. And in addition to attending colleges, I began performing at colleges. And it's really about your own mindset. And you guys have a lot of really valid things to say. I'm sure if you've seen contemporary poetry, it's been because of something you found on Tumblr or saw on Twitter as watch this poet decimate the patriarchy in 3 minutes. There is an audience out there for people wanting to know your opinion and see your perspective on the world that we're living in. And all you really have to do is connect with that audience.
Speak to the phrase, no qualifiers.
Yes. Yes. So when I first met Miss McDonald was in 1999 when I was her teaching assistant at the Governor's School, which was a summer program where kids would go away for 6 weeks and study a subject of their choosing. It was highly competitive, and we were in charge of fiction. And we had all female students in our class, and there was a peculiar habit that they got into, which I eventually outlawed, which was qualifying. And I'm sure you've all experienced this in class when you have to give a presentation and you get up, let's say you have to read a poem in front of your whole class, and you get up and you go, well, I don't know if this is any good. Or, I just wrote this, so I don't know. Or someone else did a killer poem and you go, well, this isn't gonna be as good as that. And it's just saying to the audience, don't take me seriously. And for young people, and especially young people who come from a demographic that is underrepresented in the arts, so women, people of color, any sort of, if you feel yourself an other, it is extra important that you never use qualifiers. We don't need any help in this world to make people take us less seriously. It's really important that you get used to presenting your work without qualifying it negatively. It feels good in the moment, because it says, it releases your worry. Oh God, what happens if people think this is the best I can do? But we're all in a school setting. We all understand that we're on a path and what we're presenting isn't necessarily going to be perfect. But you want people to take you seriously. And so in our classroom, in an earlier, more innocent time, I introduced the concept of spraying the girls in the face with a water pistol whenever they qualified. And the reason was, because that's how I train cats. So if a cat isn't doing something you want, you just pop it in the face real quick with a water pistol. It doesn't really hurt them, but it startles them and it makes them stop what they're doing. And I told them, if you in this day and age are saying something negative about your art, and you're a woman artist at this prestigious opportunity that was highly competitive to get into, then in that moment you are as dumb as a cat, so I will train you like a cat. Fortunately, I did not realize that we would have a parent-teacher weekend where I would need to respond to parents about why I had been shooting their children in the face with a water pistol.
One final question from me,
Yes.
And that is, if there was a film of your life, what would you title it?
I don't know yet. I feel like my life's just begun. So I think there's more adventure to be had.